All right, hi everyone. I'm Toby. Welcome to this talk about organizational design, creating flexible working practices in a post-COVID environment. One small administrative announcement. If you have any questions, just leave them in the chat and we'll try to answer all of them as good as we can. All right, so organizational design. Creating flexible working practices. What does that actually mean, and why is that a topic that we're going to be dealing with today, and what is my expertise in that? So let me start with a brief introduction. I'm Toby. I'm a co-founder of HQ Labs and Aworks. We do B2B SaaS tools, and we've been doing that for more than 10 years. And our SaaS tools deal with organizational design. So we have helped teams organize their projects, their tasks, their work in general. So I would say about 1,000 teams a year join our portfolio, and we help each and every one of them to get a grip on their work management. And that's the experience I would like to share with you today, especially when it comes to the changes that COVID has brought to our working environments. Now, the industries that I see are very diverse. We work with a lot of creative folks who have their very own, very creative, very flexible work environments. We also work at the very other end of the spectrum, so public services, banks, and other more traditionally oriented organizations. So there's a nice mix there as well. And my personal mission is to explore the evolution of work. That's what I would like to know as much about and to contribute to as much as I can. So that's the expertise that I bring to this talk today. Now, let's dig right in. Obviously, COVID has brought a huge disruption, a huge change to the way that everybody works. And my expertise is with teams who do knowledge work, right? So that's the setting that I can contribute to. And there is one very general fundamental mechanism that we all suffer from. We systematically overestimate change in the short term, but we underestimate its long-term impact. So currently, that is exactly what we see when we start talking about the changes that COVID has brought to our work environments. Everybody is going crazy about how video conferencing and better remote collaboration tools will actually change the way we work fundamentally forever. But I would say that impact is probably very minor. Because in the end, what we try to do with all those tools is we simply try to translate things that we've always done in person into the virtual space. And the long-term impact is, well, you can work from anywhere you want, but the work itself doesn't change at all. We simply change the medium that we work in. But what is going to be hugely impactful long-term is the changes that this will have on leadership and team culture. And we haven't even begun to really see those and to be able to judge those fully. So that's what I'd like to talk about and to give my perspective on. Let's divide, the global timeline into the before, where organizational design used to be a predefined playbook. And why is that special? Well, because organizational design used to have a right way to do it. Everybody more or less agreed on how to run a team, how to build hierarchy, how to lead people in general. There was, nuances all around, whether you're a creative art director or a, bank manager, always had impact on the way that your team culture functions. But in general, there used to be a playbook for building a new organization, which included predominantly unidirectional hierarchies. So the further up in the food chain you used to be, the more people you would have to directly tell what to do. So a very one-way leadership style is, still in many organizations, very much predominant. And that also includes very simple report and control setups. So when you're the one directing somebody else in a very detailed way, then the feedback that you get back in terms of systems and reports and so on also can be very unidirectional. You simply get a response. You ask somebody to do something and then you get, I did it, I didn't, it went well, it went badly. But these things, they will gradually change in the now, because currently what we see is a huge step change induced by well, COVID and the impact that it has had without any clearly defined best practice. Nobody knew what to do with teams that from one day to the other deal with high personal uncertainty, as well as a disruption to their shared, well, working environment, workspace. And while remote environments that we see more and more at the moment are just as productive as local ones, they are much less controllable. Now, remote spaces are just as productive as local ones. That's a bold claim, but I truly believe that they are. And all the tool discussions that we've had over the last, well, let's make it 2 years, all contribute to making remote work just as productive as local work, because that's what video conferencing, task management tools, and so on are built to do. But controlling that is a huge problem. Now, and we'll get back to that in a second. And what's also very new is that the less obvious changes in leadership style, in motivation, and in many other areas that belong into the realm of team culture require profound change that we'll get into in a second. Now, let's get back to that control aspect. Empowerment requires control. And that's something that I feel the public discussion around remote work, new work, COVID-induced work setups are completely ignoring for the time being. Everybody talks about empowering people when they are remote to take their own decisions and to lead their own teams and to find their own work style. But what everybody keeps ignoring is that this is a huge a huge ask for somebody, for a leadership position who has never been trained for this. And good leadership requires a safe environment for people in leadership positions. Because if they don't feel safe, what they do is they start to micromanage in a high level of detail. And that's something that is directly opposite to giving more empowerment, or to empower teams in a way that we consider to be modern. And that also brings a lot of creativity and power to teams. So from a leadership perspective, in order to gain a safe environment that will allow leaders to empower their teams, that requires visibility. It requires a certain degree of control. And when we talk about handing leadership the tools and the opportunity to control their teams, everybody goes, Big Brother is watching me, and we cannot go there. That's the work style of the past. But I would say it's not. It's a very legitimate feeling that leaders all over the world have currently. They have the feeling that they're losing control of what is actually happening in their teams. And after all, being in a leadership position is not only about directing teams and people, it's also about being responsible for those teams' results. So it's a very legitimate ask to say that leaders need tools and methods to control in order to be able to let go and empower their teams to take their own decisions. That goes hand in hand, and that's a change that has been very much overlooked over the last couple of months. There's another aspect to the changes that we see in our post-COVID environment. It's that our world is more asynchronous than ever before. Sounds simple, you know, a WhatsApp chat is a very asynchronous style of communication, and everybody is very much used to that. But completely asynchronous work in a business setting is still very much under development. And A lot of people still try to completely ignore that. That's why video conferences and online meetings are in such high demand, because we try to transfer the synchronous mode of teams leadership and work into the digital environment. But asynchronicity is a fact of modern work. It won't go away. People work in more time zones. They work on different projects simultaneously. People need to work asynchronously to be able to cope with the complexity of modern work. So it doesn't do to ignore that and to try to keep that slow, synchronous style of teamwork. But without the proper infrastructure, that is an invitation to chaos. If you're trying to work asynchronously, but the only way to communicate is in a synchronous, I don't know, video conference, that won't work. It'll just overload people's schedules completely and won't help anybody. Fortunately, there are digital tools, and we'll get to those in a second, that are designed for asynchronous work and that take the brunt of that coordination between projects. Now, what are those tools? And as I said in the beginning, that's the part that we contribute to this entire setup with the company that we run. Aworks is a work management tool, and we design it to be modern teams' operating system. You need a place in your organization that can handle the complexity of organizing work, projects, tasks, deadlines, comments, files. It all needs to go somewhere. And if you use traditional tools for that, be they video conferences, emails, file storage in a very traditional manner, that will just amplify the chaos instead of merging all these things in one place. And that is one of the reasons why we need modern tool setups to work in that way. Let me talk about a third aspect that has changed very much over the past couple of months. The only motivator that actually works when people are remote is purpose. Sounds simple, but I think it's not. And the real reason for that is widely overlooked. Now, traditionally, when everybody shares an office, sees each other every day, there's a couple of methods that really work very well and have worked well historically. There is the competition between team members that works as a motivator. When everybody sees how well everybody else does, that is something that usually motivates people. There is peer pressure, enforcing values, enforcing behaviors that only works well when you have direct contact all day long, every day. There is team-based reassurance, which is sort of the opposite of that. Group values that only work again when you're able to observe behavior and also feel the benefit and the shame of not adhering to shared values, which can be a very, very powerful method of enforcing company culture and motivation. Now, when everybody sits at home or wherever they are in the most beautiful places they can find to set up their remote office, these methods just lose impact. Because somebody sitting at home all day and being able to spend a lot of time thinking about what am I doing here? I could be doing 20 other things without any distractions, without any peer pressure, without, just being on your own and thinking about that will really make you reevaluate every part of why am I doing this? And that is only amplified if the location or the environment that you're in is not your home, but some other remote place that you actually enjoy being while doing your work. So what's the answer to that? The answer is the 3 types of purpose that as a company and as a team leader you can deliver and you can try to foster to motivate teams. Now, number 1 is personal development. What is the personal ambition? How do people want to develop? Where do they want to go? If you can really identify these personal motivators and make them a part of your company culture, your development, that is a huge motivator also in remote teams. Number 2 is product impact. if you can repeat the mantra of why are we actually building this as a company, whatever it is, again, this is a huge motivator in terms of why am I doing this? Well, because I'm, a part of changing the world. Now I realize that not every company is literally changing the world, and not every product has global environmental impact. Ours doesn't, but it does have an enabling impact on how teams work, how successful people are all over the world, realizing projects that we, run with the software that we provide. And I think connections between the work that people do every day and the impact their companies have is huge. And number 3 is organizational relevance. To put into focus the role and the individual contribution that everybody on a team has on company success is the third kind of purpose that teams need to motivate people wherever they are and whatever work style, whatever style of new work teams would like to implement. Again, none of these 3 is new. But the point is that most teams that I talk to every day have not put these 3 front and center in their team development, in their motivation efforts, in the way that they design their new work processes, in the way that they design workspaces, they choose in the way they choose their management methods. And there are methods around that have been around for 20, 30 years, such as objectives and key results, a management tool that actually tries to put everything that happens in a company or in a team into a larger perspective and visualize the individual's personal impact on company development. I think that management methods like that will be everywhere over the next couple of years, because companies who don't use them and who don't put the purpose-based motivation into the center of how they build teams will have huge problems building their teams and finding people who are motivated to work for them. Now, why am I, as somebody who's usually implementing software at teams worldwide, why am I talking about this? Why is motivation suddenly something that I'm interested in when it comes to team building? Well, I think that modern teams need 3 things in the landscape, in the tool landscape that everybody sets up at the moment. And tools, and tools are for fools. Those are all things that we keep saying at the moment, because everybody is introducing basically a new tool for organization or team organization every day. So it feels like we're overwhelmed with digital tools and digital processes. And it's difficult to actually keep track of what do we need? What do teams really need when it comes to a modern organizational tool landscape? And we believe that those are 3 things. Number 1, every team needs an operating system, a tool that helps organize everything that's going on. That's what we do with Aworks. These are tools that bundle everything that happens everywhere in the team in one single central location. You bundle different topics into projects. Those projects will contain to-dos, tasks. These will have status. And that is why, and one of the reasons they have a status and why this needs to be a central tool is, again, going back to what I talked about a couple of minutes ago, in order to be able to give freedom to a team and to empower people to take their own decisions, leadership needs a way to control progress. And that happens in a central organizational system that is accessible for everyone. That is a central hub for collecting all the progress information in one place, and that lets leadership take stock of where we are and put things into perspective. Now, what is the alternatives? How did this happen in a pre-COVID environment? Well, it happened in team meetings, basically. So whenever leadership needed a status, there would be some sort of team meeting where everybody would get together. You would go through an agenda and tell everybody else, you know, the status of the work that you do. That's too slow. That's too synchronous. And that's just not doable in a post-COVID environment. So an organizational tool is the basis for running successful teams. Number 2, communication. The tool for business communication besides the phone is still the email, but emails are really quite outdated when it comes to team communications. There's tools out there, Slack, MS Teams and others, that have a much more business-oriented, team-oriented way to communicate. And I would wager that just a couple of years from now, it will be very, very difficult to find teams that have not introduced a more streamlined, team-oriented way of communications than the email. And it's the absolute minimum to implement some sort of rapid, asynchronous chat solution in a team that then again integrates as much as possible with all the other tools that teams have nowadays. And number 3 is a way to document knowledge. Now, in a very local world where everybody shares an office or at least a building and you can walk around or call someone whenever you want during office hours, it's very easy to access all that, all the knowledge stored, you know, just in people's minds. But as soon as you're dealing with people working remotely, working on several projects or even in several companies at once, you need a way to document knowledge more easily. And again, it's the same reasons that I talked about before. The world is more asynchronous, so knowledge needs to be accessible whenever you need it in a location that doesn't depend on everybody else to be available to. Knowledge is very important, again, to empower teams, because if you don't have a way to control best practice, to provide knowledge in a very prepared form, leadership will feel the need to actually tell everybody to do exactly what they want them to do all day long, which is a huge problem if you're trying to build a modern team. So these are the 3 tools that teams need: organization, communication, documentation. And for each of these 3 categories, there is an abundance of tools available on the market. There's different organizational operating systems, such as Aworks. There is different communication tools, such as Slack or Teams. There are different documentation tools, such as Confluence, Notion, whatever. And it doesn't, I'm going to go ahead and say this, even though it's kind of against our product mission, but it doesn't really matter which one you choose compared to choosing one in each of these categories. And it's, as I said, there will hardly be a team out there not running at least one solution for each of these aspects in the next years. Now, everything in life and in work is a project. That's good news, because when you start to think about work as being divided into separate projects, you suddenly realize that people have been organizing projects successfully, more complex ones, simpler ones, routine ones, for decades. And there are methods out there, proven methods to organize projects. And whoever wants to get a project management certificate, everybody who's ever worked in a management consultancy, and a lot of other people too, have been trained in these methods. And they go from simple planning tools to more complex stakeholder management processes. But the thing is, we've largely ignored that, because most teams think that, well, project management is something for project managers. And whenever we don't call something a project, it's not, and we can just ignore best practice on those topics. For example, managing a marketing team is a classic project, but nobody calls it that. It's just team management. It's everyday work. You know, it's my day-to-day. I don't need a complex planning method for that because I do it every day. And that is one of the biggest mistakes in team building and also in leadership that I see in companies that we approach at the moment, because people just ignore that best practices for organizing complex, distributed, remote work have been in place forever. And once everybody gets on board that everything in life and work is actually a project and project management methods can be applied to it, life becomes much easier. So let's set work up like it's a project. Let's use those methods. And that's what we call work management, as opposed to project management. And those are the methods that we'll see in the tool stack and in the way that teams organize in a post-COVID world. It's going to be a world of project managers,